Welcome to the TheoTherapist podcast, where theologically trained, licensed therapists share health and healing conversations. Join our host, Dr. Trice Glenn, for conversations about real-life issues from both theological and therapeutic perspectives. Each week, we speak to guiding questions with real-life application, humor, and engaging guests to share meaningful dialogues with our listeners. Let's begin.
Welcome to the first episode of the TheoTherapist podcast. I am Dr. Trice Glenn. I am the host and creator of the TheoTherapist podcast. I'm so glad you're joining me today. This is a great opportunity for me to share some wonderful information, hopefully some helpful information to those who find it interesting and intriguing, or just curious about the intersection points between theology and therapy. This particular podcast developed out of some dialogues that I had with other colleagues that share this space, this bridgeway between theology and therapy. Those of us who are theologically trained, as well as licensed professional mental health counselors and clinicians. And this gives us an opportunity to kind of come together and bring some perspectives to the forefront that don't often necessarily get to be heard. And that is, where is the bridge between kind of God thought and God followers and psychotherapy? And so that's where we're going to journey today. Today, we are going to kind of begin at the beginning. So for the outlook for this particular episode, if you are familiar and the title intrigued you, the title of today's episode is I Need Jesus and a Therapist. And we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about that. I wanted to begin a little bit with some history about myself and how my background shapes and forms what I bring to the podcast and the different things that influence the work and the integrative pieces that I use in my day-to-day practice. Also, I'm going to give us a bit of a primer, somewhat of a lexicon, if you will, if you want to use a big word, but basically just kind of some key terms that might be repeated or said every now and then in an episode. And I just want you to have a framework for where that might come from. So go ahead and get a little bit comfortable. I hope you're enjoying. You're in a good space where you can sit and listen to this podcast, or you're traveling or walking or exercising. Glad you're joining us. Sit back. We're going to begin with just a little bit of background about myself. So, as I mentioned, I have a doctorate. I am a licensed professional counselor. But long before that, my career took many different paths before I ended up where I am now. So first of all, I like to think of my career in kind of the BC or the BS, basically before seminary. In my early career, like in college, I worked in some local politics and a few stints on Capitol Hill. After that, when I graduated college, I took an extreme left turn and went into the music industry, where I was a music promoter for about 7 or 8 years. There, learned a lot about marketing, a lot about interpersonal dynamics, saw a lot of very interesting human behavior. After that, went into the other side of the world and went into IT, web design and web development, and corporate marketing. And so I've had a wide variety of different backgrounds that kind of led me to where I am and how I operate today. So as I said, that was before seminary. So once I received the call in the early 2000s, that pretty much put me on the trajectory for where I am today. I operate out of three primary modes. Out of my sense of calling, there is a space for pastoral ministry, a space for teaching, and a space, of course, for counseling. And so I still operate out of those three modes today. I am a trained chaplain, and so sometimes I'm a chaplain. I have been an associate pastor on staff, primarily working with youth because I just love youth ministry. That's where my heart is. But then in addition, of course, working with everyone in the church setting. And then I also am a professor. I teach seminary students currently, and I have a private practice. Along the way, I've been like a chaplain in some cool settings, and I've also had an opportunity to be a college counselor for a few years. And so beyond a sense of calling, The majority of my career has been in integration. I've always seen a way of helping others as looking for multiple resources and seeing how we can draw and pull upon those resources for health and healing. And so that's where we are today. And that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about in this podcast. So I mentioned we were going to talk about a few keywords, and basically I just want you to have some familiarity with the words that we're going to talk about. Perhaps it may come up in an episode or an interviewee may mention it. And so I want to give you a bit of a primer. So one of the first words, of course, is theology. It's not necessarily a word that everyone uses in common everyday language. So I wanted to give you a sense of its history and how it relates to what we're doing. So theology derives from the Greek word theos, meaning God or the divine, and the word logos, which means reasoning. Theology is the study of God primarily in the context of God and religious beliefs. Theology studies God, God's character, God's relationship to humanity, and then humanity's responsive relationship to God. And we look at that across the world, we look at that across history, and across different communal contexts. Theology can focus on a collection of religious beliefs or the broader study of religious formation or practices. Theology also can expand far beyond just one particular religious belief system. As a matter of fact, it can encompass the belief system or set of practices of multiple religions, even though its origins are closely tied to Christianity. So why look at theological perspectives in the podcast? Well, uh, Anselm would break down theology and say that it's just faith-seeking understanding. And so we're always looking for ways to understand how our faith and our faith practices connect to ways of well-being, ways of operating in the world. So in this podcast, we'll discuss how theological ideas and texts and beliefs and practices and behaviors intersect with therapeutic approaches toward healing and health. So that's one of the primary things that we're going to pull in. We definitely are going to look at spirituality and religion at times and how they intersect as well. Spirituality having more to do with a person seeking or their experience of connection with greater other, with God, with greater awareness, and religion being a sense of belonging or participating in an organized group or collective of beliefs, doctrines, behaviors, rituals. Religion is more of an organized framework versus spirituality is a connection thereof, right? A connection to greater other, a connection to self, connection to others. And so those are going to be the frameworks. Of course, when it comes to therapeutic and psychotherapeutic practice, it originated around the term originated around the early 1800s, but in general, it is how professionals they attempt to treat mental health issues or problems, usually through talk therapy. There are lots of different professionals in mental health. There are psychiatrists and psychologists. There are licensed professional counselors like myself, clinical social workers, and lots of different types of mental health workers. And so the goal of mental health help is about finding ways to empower our clients so that you have the tools to control and the different and challenging situations in your life and find ways to respond to them in healthy paths, right? We work on strategies and techniques, but the ultimate goal is to help you navigate through the difficulties in your life with either the aid of talk therapy or in some cases, psychiatrists helping you work with, other medications. Last but not least, pastoral care and counseling. Pastoral care practitioners and pastoral counselors, although our name would imply that perhaps we only care for pastors, but really it originated out of a desire for those who were clergy and ordained persons to strengthen how they are able to better care for others. Beyond what they simply had in, their parishes and their church congregations. And so they sought out additional therapeutic training so that they could bridge that space between theological training and theoretical training that comes with psychotherapy. And so pastoral counselors operate in that space of both, realizing that they are both spiritual resources and sometimes therapeutic resources that can journey with a person and help them navigate through distress and crisis and grief. But the pastoral care and pastoral counseling approach primarily involves the relational care, right? It's not just sitting back and coldly prescribing some different thoughts for you or some different behaviors. The goal of pastoral care and counseling is to journey with the person who is seeking life to be different and finding ways to relationally operate with them in their humanness. And so all of these different terms come together and kind of set a foundation and a bedrock for where we're going in this podcast. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you stuck through the kind of dictionary version of just getting us all on the same page. Now let's kind of dive more into today's topic, which is I need Jesus and a therapist. And we're going to talk about why that is. So I'm taking off kind of my professor hat. The goal of this podcast is not necessarily just to share information. A lot of it's conversation style. The majority of our episodes will be in conversation with other practitioners who find ways to integrate both their understanding of theology and therapeutic practice. They will often use a guiding question for their conversations that deal with one of their passion areas of healing and health. In particular, our next episode is with a licensed marriage family therapist and pastoral counselor who works a lot with clergy. And so our second episode is what happens when the pastor needs therapy. So make sure you're tuning into that one as well. But back to what we're talking about today. So the integration of spirituality and psychology. Oftentimes, when I've talked to people who are faith believers, their biggest struggle with going to therapy is they feel that in some way it's saying something negative about them or negative about their faith walk, that they need to go and get assistance with their mind and with their brain. Unfortunately, some religious communities, either demonize therapy or in some way demonize things that attack your thoughts and your mind as some type of negative that God wants you to only pray about. But there are many different things happening in our lives and in our bodies and in our minds that could benefit from having someone else walk alongside of us. So back to those spiritual beliefs that I spoke about a little bit earlier. Spirituality is about connectedness. It's about connecting to God and others. It's about finding a divine sense of purpose for your life, or maybe you reflect on, how God is operating through you in the world. But ultimately, if you feel some sense of spirituality and some sense of spiritual connectedness, perhaps that's even more reason to get as healthy as possible so that you're more effective in the world. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about is the stigma associated with getting mental health help from those who are faith believers. I've had many years of being a counseling director at multiple churches. And in those times, some people come to see me for counseling in the, as they say, as a thief in the night. They come concerned that someone will see them, someone will recognize them, someone will be aware that they are coming to seek help. And I often try to encourage them, reaffirm them that there is no shame in getting help. There is no lack of faith. There is no lack of trust in God when you reach out and get help. I often have said in the past, analogies similar to, if your arm is falling off, you don't hesitate to go to a doctor. You go and get someone that can offer you some help that you can't do yourself. And so sometimes we can't see ourselves by ourselves and we need someone to journey with us. And so that's where therapy comes in, is finding a way to go beyond, is this a lack of faith if I go to therapy? Is this a lack of trust in God? It's not. but God provides many type of assistance and aid for us in life, right? We have physicians, we have um, physical therapists, we have all types of different helpers and caregivers that God puts in place for us to be able to take care of our temple, for us to be able to be good stewards of the bodies that we have. And so this is another aid. This is another opportunity to be a good steward of what we have in life. And so when I talk to someone who's leery of getting mental health help, I often talk to them about what is the alternative. So, would God have you continue to suffer? Would God have you continue to be tormented? Or would God send you a helper? Would God, like Holy Spirit, send you a comforter? Send someone with wise counsel to help you navigate the difficult situations that you're facing. And we'll talk in different episodes about kind of how certain um, mental health challenges start, how they arise. You know, some come from our chemicals within our body, some come from different experiences that we face, some come from traumatic experiences. There are lots of different reasons that could lead to us being in places that we know aren't our healthiest space. And so it's not about holding on to the I'm just going to keep it to myself. It's about I want to be the best I can be. I want to be the most healthy version of myself. I want to be optimal so that I can operate optimally in the world. And so I often encourage people when you're contemplating, maybe I can try therapy. It doesn't say something bad about me, that this is about taking care of yourself. You want to take care of yourself because this is another way for you to live out and be who God created you to be. It's equivalent to kind of choosing to limp through life when you could go and get the limp fixed. Okay. I don't want to minimize anyone's journey. I don't want to minimize anyone's struggle, but I do want us to recognize there are many different ways that we can seek out help in ways that will benefit us. And it does involve, bringing someone else in our story. So I also want to speak to this. Sometimes there's a trust issue. I have worked myself with many clinicians. I counsel other counselors. I counsel clergy. I counsel, high profile folks sometimes. And one of their biggest concerns is I don't want anyone else to know that I have this need. I don't want anyone else to know that I'm seeking this help. And, we have confidentiality practices and lots of ethics around making sure that we protect your confidentiality. But one of the things I try to encourage my people to do is recognize that this doesn't make you less than. This is not a stain on who you are. This doesn't taint who you are. You having the courage to come and get healthier, that's the best self of you. That's within the better self of you. Because what that does is say that I choose to be better than this. I choose to operate better. I choose to be better in my life, in my relationships, in the way I function in the world. I want more. Okay. And so because of that, that says that you're willing not to accept less in life. You're desiring more. And that's something that whether you choose to keep it to yourself or not, it's definitely something positive in the world, something worthwhile. One of the things that I also try to encourage us to do is look at, some of the spiritual aspects of why it's so important for us to look at therapy as perhaps another option. Well, I mentioned earlier a little bit about being a good steward of ourselves, right? And if, for those of you who are Christian, if you've looked at 1 Corinthians 6 and 19, it talks about the body being a temple. Well, oftentimes, I've heard that passage read in churches where they talk about, don't smoke, don't drink, or, don't bring things into your body that could taint your body or damage your body or harm your body. But think about this. If you allow things to remain in your body, in your life, in your mind that cause you distress and distract you, isn't that also destroying the temple? If you allow chaos to remain in your temple, How is that taking care of your temple? We're given one life to be a good steward of. And I always say you were given your own life first before you cared for anyone else, before you had siblings to care for, parents to care for, a spouse to care for, or your own children to care for. You always had yourself first. That's the first task that God gave you, was be a good steward of the self I've given you. And so that's something that I hope that we'll continue to look at, is what does it mean to be a good steward of the self God gave me? How do I make sure that I am taking care of this life, this body that God entrusted me with? And so consider ways of trying to do that will be helpful. Also, look at Jesus's example. Jesus was one that would not leave someone in dire straits. Oftentimes there were people who called out, Jesus, Jesus, help, Jesus, Jesus, help. And Jesus would stop and help. He didn't say, go somewhere and sit in secret with your suffering. God often chooses when you cry out for help, to heal, right? God desires that we be healed and that we be whole. And so this then is an opportunity to be healed and to be whole. The last thing I want to say is that we can't see all of ourselves by ourselves. This is kind of an old adage, but basically what it means is a lot of us like to think that if I just sit at the house, I can talk myself through it, or I'll sleep through it, or I'll try to cope with it in some other way. And to a degree, we all have a bit of resilience. We can fight some adversity. But I often ask folks, would you keep limping if you didn't have to? If there were another way, if there was a way where it didn't have to last as long, affect your life as much, continue to create devastation in your life, would you choose that option? And it's out here. I know that for some, being open and being vulnerable in a space with someone else, thinking that they might judge you or they might give you bad advice, makes people nervous. It makes people a little leery. But I often tell folks it's an opportunity. You're looking for an opportunity for things to be better. Sometimes you may not find the right fit right out the gate. I don't know about you, but I've looked for a physician before and realized, we're not the right mix. We're not the right fit. It doesn't mean I'll stop looking for a physician. It just means I need a different physician. I need to look for someone that I feel like is a better fit for my journey. And so this is an opportunity for you to say, Jesus wouldn't say I can't have therapy. Jesus wouldn't even discourage me from saying get therapy. If Jesus is about living healthy, full, whole lives, then Jesus would also say, here's an opportunity. Here's a space where you can get whole. Here's a space where you can grow and be a better you, operate better in your spiritual life, find a path forward. Here's a way. And so therapy is that option. So what do I say to those who are seeking spaces where they're in environments that don't support therapy? Well, one, this is a personal decision. Most therapists operate in spaces where you can meet privately. Some spaces are in person, some spaces are telehealth. When telehealth started, I do sessions with people sitting in cars, people sitting in closets sometimes, in spaces where they feel like they can have privacy so that they can take care of themselves. And so I say this to you. What is the best way to make sure that you're being a good steward of yourself? Being a good steward of the life God gave you. And to me, the best way to do that is using all the opportunities that you have before you to be a healthier, a more whole, and a healed self. That's what God has for you. All right, so our next episode, I want to make sure that you come back and recognize, today I did a solo for our first episode, but starting next week, we're going to start with our conversational interviews. Our first one will be Dr. Faye Weems-Singleton. As I mentioned, she's a licensed MFT as well as a pastoral counselor, and she's going to come to us with an episode about clergy mental health and what happens when the pastor needs therapy. Our third episode will be Dr. Myrna Malone, and she will talk to us about grieving during the holidays. So look forward to what's coming, what's ahead. Check out our post. If you haven't already, definitely follow, like, and share our pages. Visit our website, which is www.theotherapist.com. I want to also say the words that are shared in this podcast are not a substitute for professional counseling help. We encourage everyone to go out and actually seek a professional to help you address the issues that you may have. If you have any questions, if you're not sure how to find a therapist, drop us a comment, send us a message through our website, and we'll get back to you with some guidance and some direction. Also, know that you can donate to help make this podcast grow and continue to provide this great information on different platforms. If you'll visit our website, again, theotherapist.com, you'll be able to donate there, either a one-time donation or a monthly donation, however you choose. We appreciate everything that you do. Thanks for being here. I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care of yourself. Be well and bless.
Check out Dr. Glenn's new journal series titled Brain Dump Journals for the Busy, available on Amazon. Visit our websites for more information at thetheotherapist.com or catriceglenn.com.